Today, I'm going to be making custom Magic the Gathering cards based on part 4 of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Diamond is Unbreakable. And before I begin, a quick spoiler warning. I will be mentioning parts of the show, and if you don't want to be spoiled, I would recommend clicking off of the video. Rohan, Adept Artist, is a 6/6 legendary human for 2, 3 black, and 3 white, and has, when you cast the spell, choose one. Gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn, or choose a card type. Target opponent can't cast spells of the chosen card type. Rohan's stand is Heaven's Door, and it allows him to change and manipulate people's powers by opening them up like a book and writing inside them. Two of the most common things he does with this ability is essentially preventing somebody from doing something or controlling their actions. And to represent this in Magic the Gathering, I made it so when you cast him, you can do either of those. Either take control of an opponent's turn like you do with Emrakul, or make it so they can't cast spells of a chosen card type. This can be an oppressively good card in the right matchup, and to make sure this isn't abused too much, I gave him an insanely high mana cost of 8. And I also made it so you can't flicker him, making it so it's not oppressively bad like a Mindslaver lock. Tonio, Mending Chef, is a 6/6 legendary human for 2 white, white, green, green, with food tokens you control have pay 2 and tap. If your life total is less than your starting life total, your life total becomes your starting life total. And if your life total is greater than your starting life total, gain 10 life instead. Tonio is of course probably one of the most fun characters in the entirety of part 4, being a very random addition to the cast. His ability essentially allows food to heal almost any ailment that anybody has, as we see where he basically fixes everything wrong with Okuyasu when him and JoJo come to the restaurant. His stand essentially allows him to heal any ailments that somebody has and makes some of the best tasting food possible, as we see when Okuyasu and Josuke come to his restaurant. To represent this in Magic the Gathering, I made it so when you activate a food token now, you can return yourself to your starting life total, or if you have more than your starting life total, you can actually gain 10 life. I think this is a super cool way to build a food deck, and it would be pretty brutal if you aren't able to check it properly. Koichi, Growing Power, is a legendary human 1/1 for 1 blue with level up, and from levels 1 to 3 it has tap target creature and has the power and toughness 2/2, and at level 4+, tap target creature and opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step, and it's a 4/4. Koichi is probably one of the most important characters throughout part 4, and one thing about him is how he grows and develops. This is mainly seen in his stand Echoes, which grows and develops with him, going from Act 1 to Act 2 to Act 3. I decided to reference this idea of the stand evolving in the card itself. Koichi's stand gives him this sound effect power, which allows him to put a sound effect on something and allow it to happen once somebody interacts with it. So he uses this to knock people over in battle. And once Koichi's reached his full power, his stand gets the ability to essentially hold somebody down to the ground indefinitely. To represent this in Magic the Gathering, I made it so when he's just able to do the sound effect thing, it is represented in levels 1 through 3, allowing him to tap down creatures, but allowing him to tap down a creature and have it not untap during its controller's next up tap step is the closest representation I could think of to how he is able to hold down people once he's reached his final ability. Yukako, Kokichi's Kidnapper, is a 3/2 legendary human for 2 green, blue, blue, and has reach, and whenever Yukako, Kokichi's Kidnapper, enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature for as long as you control Yukako, Kokichi's Kidnapper. Yukako is Koichi's love interest in the show, but her first introduction is a somewhat tumultuous one to say the least, with her kidnapping Koichi and locking him in a house while she cooks for him and tries to teach him how to be a better person. It's a weird and toxic scene, and to represent this in Magic the Gathering, I made it so you gain control of a creature for as long as you control her, representing the idea of you kidnapping a creature from your opponent's board. And on top of that, I also gave her reach to reference her stand, with her stand being her long hair, which she's able to mentally control and use effectively as a weapon and defense mechanism. And considering how far it can go out, I thought the best way to represent this was by giving it reach. Cheap Trick is a legendary aura for 1 black, and it has enchant creature, and whenever enchanted creature becomes tapped, destroy it. Cheap Trick is a very weird stand in part 4, with Rohan gaining control of it unexpectedly. The way Cheap Trick works is that whenever somebody sees the back of whoever controls the stand, that person just dies. And it leads to a very weird episode where Rohan's trying to escape the stand, but also maneuvering in a way where he doesn't let anybody see his back. And to represent this in Magic the Gathering, I made it so whenever a creature becomes tapped, it gets destroyed, essentially referencing the idea that whenever the back is seen, it destroys that creature. With a creature being tapped, the closest thing I could think of to a back being shown. Makeover Master is a 3/4 legendary human cleric for green, white, and a blue with vigilance and tap and choose 1. Put art or name sticker on target non-land permanent you control, or target creature becomes the color of your choice at the beginning of the next end step, or target creature becomes the color of your choice until the beginning of your next end step. Aya Stan Cinderella allows her to change the face and shape of people to make them feel more attractive, and we can see this in the episode with Yukako. To represent this in Magic the Gathering, I made it so you can manipulate a creature's appearance in a few ways, with the most obvious example being the sticker cards that we got in Unfinity, but also made it so you can manipulate the color of the creature until the beginning of your next turn, referencing the idea that it doesn't last forever. And this can be used in combination with some weird stuff with Painter's Servant to make some cool card combos. Kira Killer Queen is a 5/7 legendary human horror for 4 blue, black, and a red, with Bites the Dust. Whenever Kira Killer Queen becomes the target of a spell or ability, end the turn. And whenever Kira Killer Queen deals combat damage to any target, deal 3 damage to that target at the beginning of the next end step. And Sheer Heart Attack. You can play black and a red to tap and destroy the lowest mana value creature target opponent controls. Kira is of course the villain of part 4, being the murderer that the gang is trying to hunt down. Kira has access to the stand Killer Queen, one of the most powerful stands in the entire part, and I tried to represent all of its abilities in this card. The first ability is the final ability that we see at the end of part 4, Bites the Dust. The ability Bites the Dust is used for him to hide his identity in the show, essentially reversing time whenever Hayato gets close to revealing his identity, essentially reversing time whenever his identity is about to get exposed to Jotaro and the others. And to represent this in Magic the Gathering, I made it so whenever Kira becomes the target of an ability or spell, you end the turn, essentially giving this idea of time manipulation that we see in a lot of Teferi cards. And also being a very strong way to give Kira protection from our opponent's removal spells, making him super hard to deal with. Another ability of Killer Queen's kit is its ability to put bombs into people, essentially making it so you can detonate them remotely. And to represent this in Magic the Gathering, I made it so at the end of your turn, if you dealt combat damage to any target, you also deal an additional 3 damage to them on your end step, which I think is a super cool way to represent detonating bombs after you've been touched by Killer Queen. Finally, the ability Sheer Heart Attack is to represent the same ability that Kira shows off in the show, with it being a remote bomb that he doesn't have direct control over how it targets something. In part 4, Sheer Heart Attack is a remote bomb that executes by itself, essentially going to the closest heat source it can find and blowing up. And to represent this in Magic the Gathering, I made it so you can destroy the lowest mana value creature an opponent controls, showing that you don't have direct control over what exactly it targets, just like Sheer Heart Attack. If you enjoyed this, you should check out my original video on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, where I actually have custom cards for Josuke and Okuyasu in it.